Hi, I'm Brian Boggs and welcome back to Boggs Bench. Today I want to talk to you about some of the finer points of sharpening and a little bit about how I've come to understand them. I started chair making about 38 years ago, and I think it was within the first year and certainly by the second year I was starting to explore tool making, partly because none of the spoke shaves I could find were able to do what I thought a spoke shave should be able to do, and my mind had already been distorted in that way by some reading I had done in James Krenoff's books about how well he was able to hand plane to a finish. I felt like a spoke shave is too close to a hand plane not to be able to generate the same quality of surface, but I wasn't getting that from anything I could purchase, and it was taking a long time to tune them up, and the blades weren't holding an edge, and so on and so on. And so I thought, all right, let's just start over. How do these things work? And it started a study on the ergonomics of the tool itself, the balance of the tool, but also a lot of time focusing on metallurgy. What's the ideal metal to use? How hard should it be relative to how tough it should be? How well does it need to be able to be sharpened versus holding an edge? And what about the quality of edge that that particular steel could hold? And so for several years, I stayed in kind of experiment and study mode while producing and trying to understand everything I could about what is going on at the edge from the time that we start honing it to the time that we completely wear it out. Over the years, I think I've worn this blade out, worn the blades in this spoke shave out about twice. I know I've gone through 3 blades in this shave. This one's about done with its second blade. So I'm not afraid of sharpening my tools. I'm not afraid of sharpening them aggressively. What I've learned is that without fairly aggressive sharpening, you're not going to get to the best edge that your tool can provide for you. So what I want to first do is talk about the shape of that geometry, and I'll do that with a couple of crude drawings I've done. So I made 3 drawings, really rough, but generally representing what I imagine is a sharp blade, a dull blade, and a blade somewhere in the middle of its process of being sharpened. In a sharp blade, ultimately we want 2 planes that intersect at a perfect edge that only leaves about a molecule of material right there at the edge. Now that's maybe technically impossible, but that's the goal. A dull edge wears a little bit on both sides. It doesn't leave a point, really it's more like this. But most of the wear seems to be happening on the part of the blade that's in front. This would be a drawing of a bench plane rather than a low angle block plane. A low angle block plane would wear primarily from this side rather than this side. But this in a bench plane is the direction that wood is abrading the blade the most. So you've changed the angle, and in order to get this tool, this blade, to be restored to the condition of this blade, all of this material has to come off so that we maintain the same angle and we've gotten rid of all of this material. And when I've helped students sharpen, what the tendency seems to be is to not want to remove so much material and waste the blade away. But that blade has already been wasted. It's been worn to not be cutting anymore, so we've got to remove it to get it sharp again. And in a continued effort to avoid taking too much material off, often where students will stop is at this stage where we've got what might look like a nice flat here, what feels like a sharp edge, and even from this side can feel like a sharp edge because this can be microscopic. What this is essentially a burr that's been created and then honed to the same level as this plane. And when this is small enough, it's nearly indetectable with your fingers or with your eye. I'll show you a trick later for how I detect this when I can't see it. But I have learned to be able to see hints of it, and also have gotten aggressive enough to where I just get rid of all of this the first time and don't have this to start with. But what happens here happens particularly often in A2 steel blades or other alloy steel blades. I've got some that are A11 blades, and it's a bear to get rid of the burr on those. But the burr can stretch out here, and in those alloys, the blade is tough enough that this burr is actually strong enough to cut. So you can cut for a little while with this, and then that burr breaks off and your edge looks kind of like a saw blade. And I think that's greatly contributed to A2's lack of popularity or diminishing popularity in the market, because people are not finishing the honing job, leaving this burr sticking out, think they've got it sharp, the burr breaks off, and they blame the blade for being brittle or holding a brittle edge. Actually, the opposite is true. A2 is a much longer wearing blade because of its toughness. It's just also tougher to sharpen. And I'll explain a good technique for that here in a little bit. One of the challenges in talking about sharpening is that everything that I'm going to be talking about today is virtually invisible. Now you can see the smooth surface of a piece of wood. We can't generate the feel and exact look of that very well through this camera. So I'm going to be doing some crude things to enlarge the visual that I can give you to help you understand through demonstrations what I'm talking about. And one demonstration that I've found to be useful is just with a piece of plywood, sand in different directions to a bevel, and you can watch, because that's big enough to actually see what's happening. You can see how abrasive treats a material as it leaves an edge. So I'm using an 80 grit belt here on this edge sander, and I'm putting some pressure on here just to show you very quickly how the burr gets generated. And you can see from this edge, it's pretty coarse, pretty fast, and a pretty big burr. Now, I'm going to orient it the other way with the grit cutting into the blade, and you can already see that the burr is disappearing because behind the cut is supported by the rest of the blade body. Now look at this, that burr is basically gone. Now I'm going to orient it the other way, and in this neutral position, as long as you don't press too hard, you're not going to create a burr. There's a little bit of loose hair on there because this is plywood. So now that we've done that, looking at a blade again, we can see that what we want to do is either hone in this direction or in this direction, not in this direction. Because no matter what you're cutting, when you're cutting toward an edge like this last bit of material is going to break over or bend over because there's no support behind it to resist the pressure of the abrasive being forced against it. So what I want to do is move into how I use stones to create the relatively burr-free edge that I'm after. And as I've been trying to explore this over the years, over the last 30 years or more, I've been watching how the blade responds to different stones. And one of the things I've found is, just like with sanding, light pressure is going to give you a better result than hard pressure. The reason is the same as what I was demonstrating with the belt sander. The more you press here, the more you're going to create a burr. And the burr is the enemy of a sharp edge. When you create a burr, you're bending that edge over, and then you've got to come back and cut it from the other side with light pressure, otherwise you're just going to bend it back over again. You keep bending that burr back over one way and then the other, and it's going to break, and then you're going to have a rough edge, you're going to start sharpening again. So we want to avoid as much as we can creating that burr to start with. I was looking at different sharpening systems, and there's one that uses sandpaper, and one of the things that they demonstrate in that is that all of your stroking has to be away, or rather in this direction, so that you don't cut into the abrasive paper. And that to me is just going down the wrong trail, because you can get a blade sharp that way, but you're creating extra work by generating a burr that then needs to be removed. What I've found over the years is that just about any sharpening system can eventually get you a sharp edge, and some of them are a lot faster than others. After trying just about everything out there that I've seen or learned about, I've come to really appreciate Nano Hone, which is it's an American-made product. It's a ceramic stone. The abrasive in this is aluminum oxide, and it's a baked material, but it's baked at a low temperature, and that makes it, or allows it to stay friable like a traditional water stone, but not as friable. So it's a really nice balance between wearing away and exposing new fresh particles like a water stone will, being really smooth and staying relatively flat, not wearing away so fast that you're constantly having to flatten the stone. And because of the technology used to separate the different grits, it's called nanostone because of that technology. The size of the grit in each stone is very, very uniform, and that means that it cuts very well. You're not getting excessively deep scratches in each grit, and it doesn't take as long to go through the next step. So you're not having, when I'm at 15 micron, I'm really at 15 micron. I'm not at, 13 through 18. So it's just a very quick cutting, very smooth cutting stone. And it also tends to, because it cuts so, the abrasives are so sharp and they cut so smoothly, that in and of itself helps eliminate the creation of a burr. I've also tried a number of different sharpening guides. I couldn't afford any of them when I started out, so I taught myself how to hone freehand, and for the most part still do. But big blades like this one, when you're trying to hone freehand, there's a lot of weight back here to manage with your fingertip pressure, and so it's a little trickier to hone big blades like this freehand. So my favorite guide now is also a Nano Hone guide, because it's wide enough to hold my biggest plane blade, and it fits on the stone easy. It's quick to set. What I'm going to do is just set it up here. I just set it by eye. In another video, I'll talk about methods of getting angles and stuff like that, but I want to keep this video focused on what's happening between the stone and the blade. Another thing I'll just mention but not get into very much is I always hollow grind my tools, and that's just because I've gotten used to that, because I freehand hone most of the work that I do. A lot of people don't like freehanding or aren't comfortable with it. I'm not even going to demonstrate how I do that. I just want to talk about today, the stone and the edge and what happens when you bring them together. So with Nano Hone, one of the first things you need to do is get the stone flat. And they sell a diamond plate that's really good at flattening them quite quickly. And you want to use some water. You don't need to use a lot. I'm just going to squirt a little on here. And no matter what you've done to get your coarse angle, grinding or heavy honing, I'm going to start with this hone just with a few strokes to get a perfectly straight, even edge. And I want to stroke this or hone this until I feel a burr. Now, I was talking about not wanting a burr. You're going to get a burr, but you want to get the least amount of burr you can, and you don't want to get a burr that you're going to break off later. So you need to hone lightly. Okay, that's a pretty uniform burr. That's 70 micron. I'm going to go, whoops, silly me. And I just got these sitting on a wet t-shirt. Just a quick way of keeping them wet. So I'm going in the opposite direction that I was going this way. Now I'm going this way to cross the direction that I was scratching the blade in before. I think that might allow me to get a quicker finish. And notice I'm not honing the back of the blade just yet. These stones are too coarse for that. I'm just tuning the edge. That was 15 micron, now it's 6 micron. I'm going to go in and hit the back of this edge, or the back of this blade a little bit. One thing I like about the holders, that they're the stands they provide, this little stone pond, which is a separate thing. This has got a rubber bottom, sits in there nicely. And these have these nut bolt heads that stick into the back of this, grip that really nicely, and it gets it up high enough that I can just turn this over and lightly hone the back of it. Now you definitely want to keep your stone flat for doing this. If you've got a hollow in your stone, this is going to go into something like this. You're going to tip it up and you're going to not hone the back of this flat. This is really important to keep this flat and to keep a light touch on it. Remember that I'm going forward. I'm not going to hone backwards, just to minimize the generation of a burr. And when I'm doing the back, unless I'm getting rid of scratches from a new blade, all I'm doing is getting rid of the burr, and the lighter the touch, the better. So that I'm cutting that burr off with the abrasives and not bending it over with pressure. Two micron. And these stones, actually, I'm being a little bit silly to go through every grit here. It's not necessary. I could definitely skip a grit, but because I'm using each grit, I don't have to spend much time at all on any one of these. You can tell by how much darker that got so quickly that it indicates it's removing quite a bit of material, even though this is a 1 micron stone. Now, I can't really, it's a little crazy and a little risky to just run your finger across a sharpened blade like that, but after a few stitches, you learn how hard you can push. That feels really good, and I'm not feeling a burr there, but one of the things that I do to amplify a burr's roughness is I can take a paper towel, it doesn't matter if it's wadded up or not, but I want to expose the edge where it's cut, and just drag it across here. And I couldn't feel a burr, but there is just the tiniest little rattiness on this edge. It's invisible, I can't feel it, but with the edge of this paper towel run across there, I can just barely detect it. So what I'm going to do, leaving the mud on here, in fact I'm going to put a little bit more mud to use. I'm going to take this little pine block and put some of this mud on it. And I'm just going to draw this blade through the corner of that at the end grain. And what this does is it's honing, I guess more stropping, both sides of the blade at the same time. So I'm not going to generate a burr. The blade going into the end grain like this, can you see that? Going into the end grain like this is just slipping between the fibers, and the muddy fibers will help polish that edge and completely eliminate that burr for a beautiful finished edge. Now let's see if I can feel that. It's still there. So I'm going to get a little bit more aggressive with this. I'm not taking I could take this out of the hone, but sometimes I decide I want to go back and touch it up a little bit more and I don't want to have to reset. So this guide is not in the way. And that's it. So thinking about the burr while you're sharpening instead of thinking about the polish of your edge, I think is going to get you to a really good cutting edge a lot more cleanly and a lot more quickly. Hope that was useful. See you next time.